The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. The fountain of youth might be a fantasy, but the biology of aging, and more specifically, the science behind the manipulation of that biology, is not only real, it's become big business. The challenge, at least the challenge for serious and legitimate biopharmaceutical companies in the anti-aging space, has less to do with biology than it does perception. Does the biotech investment community understand and embrace the concept? Equally, if not more importantly, will the FDA and other regulatory agencies lean into the idea that aging itself might be viewed as an indication that warrants therapeutic review? And from a commercial perspective, how does a legitimate biopharmaceutical company focused on combating the physical deterioration marked by the advance in our years separate and differentiate itself from the billions of dollars being poured into the consumer packaged anti-aging and cosmetic medical procedures markets? I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and my guest on today's show is a really good one to address questions like these. His name is Jerry McLaughlin. He's a big bio veteran, and he's CEO at Life Biosciences, a preclinical biopharma company whose opening argument reads like this, and I quote, "Contrary to popular belief, aging is not caused by random wear and tear, but instead is caused by a discrete set of biological mechanisms that can be targeted therapeutically." Let's get to know Jerry a little bit and break into the Life Biosciences value prop. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here and appreciate the introduction.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And, when I mentioned in that sort of opening statement that you were a really good guy to talk to and tackle these questions with, I was referring to your biopharma industry chops. You've been around for quite a while. You put 11 years. I don't mean to age you that way. I don't mean to say it like that, but you put in 11 years at Merck. Before jumping into endopharmaceuticals, then NewPath, then a gene bio. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely.
And then Neotherapeutics before joining Life Biosciences in 2021. So to get to sort of know your worldview in the space a little bit, I want to kind of just take a real quick jog through that trajectory. Merck onto what looked decidedly like a number of much smaller, considerably smaller, and ultimately startup biopharmas. What was the, I guess, impetus for leaving Big Bio to jump into those positions?
Yeah, Matt, it's a great question. And having spent more than a decade at Merck, an absolutely fantastic company, some of the brightest minds in the industry to this day, tremendous amount of relationships, a great learning experience, and a very successful company, right? When I joined, it was America's most admired company 5 years running. Blockbuster products, an opportunity to experience the benefit to patients bringing novel science to the market, right? Solving new problems, bringing early stages of the cholesterol market, the osteoporosis market, among others. And so it's tremendous experience. There does come a time and place in your career, and this happened to me about a decade in, and really trying to make that decision. Do I want to operate in this large environment, which affords tremendous opportunities, or do I want to spread my wings? And I equate it to the bird who can't spread their wings and fly. And for me, the decision was I wanted more accountability and responsibility more rapidly in my career. And so I set out on a journey to explore other opportunities. I quickly excluded other large pharma because Merck was a tremendous place. And then I stumbled on this small company, specialty pharmaceutical company called Endopharmaceuticals with 125 employees. And it was a nice transition. It had revenue, had products, which I would learn later in my career is quite the luxury.
Yeah.
And so I joined Endopharmaceuticals. And despite today, I would consider that a large company at 125 employees. But at the time, it was quite the transition, right? And arriving and lacking resources in departments. We were undersized for the task, and but it was an overall tremendous opportunity, right? It gave me that accountability and responsibility, and it also expanded my network tremendously. Mm-hmm. Endo Pharmaceuticals was built off the backs of others like myself who came from big pharma. So 6 years passed by. We went from 125 employees to 1,300 employees. And I frankly missed the early days of Endo when there was your job responsibility and what you did every day could be quite different.
Yeah.
Because there were so many needs and opportunities contributing to the company. As you grow, responsibilities tend to become trimmed and more focused, which is perfectly satisfactory and rewarding for many. I think I learned in myself that I wanted to touch it all. I wanted to be part of the business development and the growth of the company.
Yeah.
And then as I approached my 40th birthday, I had my Field of Dreams moment. If nobody remembers, there was a point early in the movie of Field of Dreams where Kevin Costner's character says, "I'm 40 years old and I've never done a crazy thing in my life," when he plows down his very valuable Iowa farm field and makes a baseball diamond out of it. And my wife was 8 months pregnant with her third child, and just a little over 4 years, I was offered a vice president's role. And I made the leap from this established specialty pharmaceutical company to a fledgling pharma company, spec pharma company with phase 1 data. And I was either employee number 9 or 10 because two of us began the same day. We have arguments who walked in the office first that day. So I was either employee 9 or 10.
Gotcha.
And frankly, that was the biggest transition. I took a pay cut to go there. And you walk in, and I thought I was under...
Jerry, let me just interrupt you real quick there. You did all this with your wife's blessing, of course. You're 8 months pregnant.
So I joined, and at first, and for anyone who's been through experience, they may know the first 2 or 3 months you have this fear of leaving the comfort of the larger company, and you realize that you're extremely resource constrained. Decisions have to be made often on experience. Mm-hmm. You quickly learn to leverage your network for free resources, for a guiding ear. So I quickly went from, within a couple of months, from the fear to the exuberance and the excitement of having all that accountability, responsibility, and being a true part of a team that was building something special to help patients.
I'm interested in kind of getting your perspective on, I mean, you talked about some of the operational, I guess, adjustments or challenges that you face making those transitions. And I want to quickly get into one of the topics before we jump into the anti-aging and life biotherapeutics conversation. One of the conversations that you and I had a little bit earlier revolved around sort of the growth of people to enable. You mentioned, at Endo that you went from 100-ish to 1,300 employees while you were there. Tell us a little bit about that sort of hiring mentality and what you've learned along the way in terms of what constitutes good people to put teams together. And I'm sure that there's nuance there and variability from one place to the next, but just give us a little bit on that.
Yeah. So I think for me, and the lessons I learned at Endo, we needed individuals who were not only smart, not only skilled, but they had to have the intangible of they were seeking more responsibility. They were flexible in their day-to-day responsibilities. If things changed on a dime, they ran to that as opposed to sitting in fear. And we made our mistakes along the way as we grew. We had growing pains. We grew very fast. But we really quickly learned to hire along those lines. And what happened was, if we brought someone in and they really couldn't contribute beyond the borders of their job responsibility, we had to find a way to move on. And but what we learned was it was that grit, resilience, versatility, flexibility, desire to contribute beyond their borders. That's what really determined and made the difference between success and I think failure in those roles. Where we've faced significant challenge when you go through a period of hyper growth, we inevitably the culture changed, and at the vice president level, and this is one of the challenges of a small company, is hire and promote from within, or promote from within, or hire from the outside. And I think it's a strategic question and a very difficult position that many executives are put in as a company is growing. And as a mid-level employee at the time, I think at times you can make the mistake of feeling like you need experience from outside as opposed to the experience from within. And we had a culture change. We had to become a bigger company with greater process. And what you lose in that at times is you lose your culture of cooperation. You lose your culture of a titleless and titleless environment where the R&D team may contribute on the marketing side and the marketing team may contribute on the R&D side. And so it's a very difficult dynamic to maintain as you grow. And so it became ever more important in the individuals we brought into the company.
Yeah. Yeah. You did a nice job there, sort of tying that back into process, like the process, the culture change. What did you bring with you from big pharma that kind of you were able to tap into to manage sort of that operational process aspect of culture change and how it impacted those employees? I've got a number of questions for you on the hiring front, but I guess I'd start with there. Like, how do you having witnessed big and having witnessed growth, what did you bring along with you that helped you, I guess, navigate that cultural operational change and the folks, the reception of that the folks you're bringing on the team had?
Yeah, I mean, so at Merck, we had tremendous resources, and I had the tremendous opportunity to work on large brands, particularly in the pre-launch and launch phase. And we had consultants and advisors. We had playbooks that we built over the course of 2 years and go-to-market development plans.
Yeah.
And that's great. And it's great when you have tremendous human resources and capital. When you move into a smaller environment, the needs don't change. You still need to have the planning, the process, but you need to operate in a much more lean and cost-efficient manner. So I think what many and myself are able to bring to these small companies is that pattern recognition and the experience of having operated in that large company environment, but then tailoring these processes to a much less human resourced environment, more so than even the capital is the human resources.
Yeah.
So being able to filter out the noise and focused on what's most important. Because at the end of the day, the principles are the same, but how you get there can be very different. So we developed processes that early on that were much more streamlined, allowed our teams to make many more decisions, right? And we had an attitude of fail fast and learn. And so I think that's the true benefit. If you have an individual, and this, I know we'll get to hiring later, but individuals who have that large company training, but can then divorce themselves from the complexity and the level of processes within big pharma, and take those lessons and re-engineer them in a much more streamlined fashion. Those who are the individuals who can succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, it occurs to me that depending on the well from which you're drawing, there's an expectation, I guess, of different skill sets in the ability to, as you put it, operate outside their boundaries, which is my initial thought is, okay, you've got a company that grows, 100-fold over a 5-year period. And we have strict hiring criteria that we only want to bring people on who are comfortable operating outside their boundaries. That's got to be extremely difficult to find that kind of person en masse. So talk us through the hiring, like as far as hiring those people, what are some of the, resources, tips, tricks, strategies, however you want to, tackle that?
So Matt, I'll take this from a sort of if we focus on endo, but I think this applies. I think what could be most valuable to folks is thinking about the early stage biotech experience.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely resource limited, and one of the things I learned very quickly when I left endo and went to NewPath, one of our board members said, "You're in the early stage biotech world now. You should be spending about 20% of your time networking." And I didn't quite understand that advice at the time, but it was important, right? You had a team of about 10 people, and I was at the time the chief commercial officer, the only commercial person in the organization, and I needed to build my network in that arena. And because my only network to that point had been previously was Merck, and then folks at Endo. Over time, as we look to hire, I think it's important to know what you want. Develop your job description clearly, as if you were hiring a recruiter. But one of the tactics we did, we all within the management team, we reached out to our networks, to our sources, and we shared our job descriptions, and we would ask for feedback and recommendations. And often we would get a variety of individuals or none. And sometimes the well would be dry, and we would hire a recruiter, and that would be that. But I can think of more than one example, and I'll give you one specific example. When I was at NewPath, we were looking for a head of commercial operations, and myself, the CFO, and the CEO all sent the job description out to a broad network, 3 separate, distinct networks, and unbelievably, a number of names came back, but from each source, the same individual came up as high on the list. And frankly, that was one of my best hires ever.
Yeah.
Tremendous employee, fit the culture, had the skill set, had the mindset. And I think it's a tremendous advantage when you have your team with the network of folks who know the company, know the individuals in the company, and then make those recommendations. So one, it saved a tremendous amount of time. And 2, it saved resources from not having to hire an executive search firm. So I think those are the types of things we do from a networking perspective. I'll give you a few other examples that I think that could be relevant. An individual I met at my time at Endo, tremendous potential, very young commercial individual who you just meet them and there's something special. And I never worked directly with this individual, but met in meetings and at outside meetings. We kept in touch, and I served as a bit of a mentor. I'm a bit over a decade older than this individual, and this was in the 2005 timeframe. And as we got to know each other, I would give him some recommendations, and I said to him, "One day I'm going to make a phone call, and you're coming." And it wasn't until 2018, and I took the role of CEO at Neos Therapeutics, and we needed to make some changes. It was a turnaround. Mm-hmm. My first call, 2 days on the job, I called this individual. I said, "It's time." And fortunately, he was in a position where he could make that decision to leave his current opportunity, and along he came for the ride. He's still there to this day. We were acquired 2 years ago. He still is well engaged with that company, doing great work. Because he brought unique skills, unique leadership, and I had trust, and I had basically observed his behavior for the last 13 years before that. Mm-hmm. That's one example. 2, as you build your network, I was looking to hire a general counsel, and we didn't have a general counsel in the company, but we were finally going to hire a general counsel, and it was a challenging hire at the time. There's a lot of competition, but I tapped into a network that over the years, it just made through the small biotech community in Philadelphia. And we hit it off, and this individual gave me the name. Perfect solution for your situation. He knew my situation as a mentor. And there you have, ended up being our hire for general counsel. And it's a phenomenal partner, and helped us through some very difficult times. It helped us build our company. And then, I look at that as a couple of good examples how you tap into that network to make really good hires.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tapping into that network. I mean, you mentioned a pretty extraordinary story where all three, all three veins produce the same gold, so to speak. I imagine that tapping into multiple networks and deploying that strategy would also give you a good diversity of response. Like it would increase the diversity of response rather than just leaving this to even a recruiting agency, right? Like it diversifies the pool.
I think so. You actually uncover candidates that, frankly, you may have never known existed, and they aren't in the traditional executive recruiter pool, which tends to lean bigger pharma, right? Mm-hmm. It gives you a greater diversity in a pool of candidates. So I highly recommend that. It's initially it's work to build that network, but then it becomes a natural evolution of your relationship.
Yeah.
You're constantly updating and sharing your experiences, where you are with your business, your challenges. So as they're thinking about how they can help, it becomes clear to them who might be great candidates that you may never have met or heard of.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more example of is be a recommendation for folks of how to recruit. Once you've worked with someone in a small farm, small biotech, and you've been through the challenges, right? It's easy on the good days. It's easy on the good days when you have good data and you're flush with cash. But when you're tight on cash or you have the inevitable speed bumps or setbacks, you really learn a lot about an individual. And when you're short-staffed, our current chief scientific officer, she's absolutely amazing. One of the best professionals I've ever met. I met her 9 years ago on the Aging Bio. Yeah. And here was a PhD neuroscientist who had worked in big pharma and was mostly focused on discovery through proof of concept. And when I joined, she was not only doing that, she was leading the clinical development efforts for a phase 2 project. She was working on formulation development and managing a contract research organization, right? All the while managing multiple grants with the NIA. And so when you work, and just tremendously great leader, one of those individuals that just has an innate ability to problem solve, and which are all critical skill sets in a startup organization. And I'd say, frankly, sometimes you have to look at that even over the jobs on their resume are important to have therapeutic experience. That's all great.
Right.
Skill sets we need to survive and thrive. So I called her when I joined Life Biosciences, and we had an opening at the senior level, and it looked like we might have an opening in the senior level in the R&D team. And she said no. And my response to her was, I know you're saying no, but I'm hearing not yet. And we had this conversation for a year.
Yeah.
And eventually she agreed to consult. And eventually another 6 months later or 9 months later, the opportunity arose where she was at a nice point in her current opportunity where she can make the decision. And she joined us full time earlier this year. And it's
that persistence paid off.
Absolutely.
It's also an important lesson around, your ask started early. You've got to be strategic. If you're filling a strategic role, let's say you said chief science officer, which chief scientific officer, which is obviously important, but you look at some of the more kind of timely roles like chief regulatory officer, chief commercial officer. You've got to take that buffer time into account, don't you? You can't be like, well, hey, we need this person next month, so let's start looking for them now.
Right. You have exactly right, Matt. And you have to look a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. We currently have planned based on our business plan, we have a hiring plan out for the next 4 years. So and that will change many times, but we have an idea of what we'll need and when. And so there's a couple of things, right? You want to continue to network and identify potential candidates for down the road. 2, identify candidates in more junior positions who you think have the opportunity in a year or two's time to develop. We hired an individual a year ago, phenomenal attitude, tremendously smart in a project manager role. And she was looking for an opportunity to not just be focused on one little thing, to learn more about the company. I said, well, you better be careful what you ask for. And we laugh about it to this day.
Right.
Join a company as employee number 8. And so I think we've given her more than she asked for, but this is what you learn, right? You put people in a situation, hire really good, talented people who have that will. They have the skill and they have the will. And she has blossomed tremendously to the point where we've expanded her role. product manager. She's an R&D, specifically in R&D and helping us run a project, one of our programs. And I think those are the types of things you need to look for as well. So it's not just hiring for where the position, where we are today, but thinking about, as you mentioned, down the road, what we'll need and starting those searches informally now. And then also hiring positions with individuals who you think can build into a next level role.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to start to move on here, but I'm going to ask you one last question about hiring. You shared some anecdotes that I'd put on the positive side. Tell us a horror story or two.
Yeah. So I've got to break that out of the drawer, Matt. The failures, the ones we hide in the drawer. Well, I've been doing this you said I'm a veteran. It's been 33 years. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. A few in hiring. I've been pretty fortunate in hiring. There's a lot of great people in biotech. And even the bad hires weren't bad people and not talented people. And I say, in many ways, the fault is on myself and our team for probably not putting that individual in the right environment. Right? I think there's a couple cardinal rules and lessons I can take. Despite the time pressure, as you mentioned, don't settle. Don't settle. It's critical to remember that in a biotech of 5, 10, 20 people, every hire has a meaningful impact on the culture and productivity and the organizational dynamics. Think about it. If you're 9 people and you go to 10, that's 10% of your culture right there.
Yeah.
And depending upon that individual, it's either going to have a positive or a negative impact. It can involve you in a positive way, or it can be distracting.
There's no neutral?
Usually not in the middle.
There's no neutral? There's no middle for you?
Usually not neutral. If they're neutral, they're probably not going to be good in this company, right? We need folks who are fiery, right? Has to be a good fiery. And then I say, be careful about just judging and stereotyping based upon the companies and the jobs on the resume. There is particularly as in a difficult search, like for years, hiring regulatory is very difficult. We're not at the point we need that now, but be careful of that. And be careful just looking at education. You need to balance that with looking at the skill set, the softer skill sets, the leadership, the execution focus, the ability to balance process and speed, discipline, ability to navigate in uncomfortable or unclear situations, right? Ability to handle adversity, how they handle adversity in things. Those are critical skills in a biotech that we need. We need someone who's going to step up and voice their opinion and not be afraid, right, in front of a board member or in front of an investor and in front of each other, right? And so those are things we learn. So the example number one, I'm not avoiding your question. So the first example, I was having that difficulty, and I'll keep this pretty somewhat general, just to it's not the individual's fault. Having a difficult time hiring a VP level position in one of the small biotechs. Mm-hmm. And it went on and on. The search went on and on. And this was a good example. Perhaps lesson learned is start recruiting well before you need the position. So we were having a difficulty finding someone that fit the DNA, that fit the experience for the position we were hiring. And I think I was worn down, but we brought somebody in, and very talented individual, very talented. And the individual has gone on to be very successful. But there should have been some warning signs as far as a cultural fit. The individual came to one of the interviews with an organizational chart of their expected organization over the next year.
Like the department that they envisioned?
Yeah, the department they were going to build.
Yeah.
And you're probably, Matt, saying, what were you thinking, right?
Well, I mean, I've interviewed enough, at this point in the podcast's chronology, I've interviewed enough new and emerging biopharma CEOs to know that, the resources usually don't support every VP I hire coming to me with a complete org chart for their department.
Yeah. And I think here's a big one, I think, that where you can assess whether this is the right place for someone to be highly successful. Because I think there's always a right place for someone to be highly successful. Mm-hmm. When you start hearing words like "my," as opposed to "our," and in case someone doesn't quite understand that, I'll say what I mean by that. And it had to do with budgets and my budget, and I had to sit you can send you down and say, no, there's an hour budget, right? We're a biotech, and this individual wasn't in direct R&D project, running a project, and there's our budget. We're developing therapeutics to help patients, and priority is the dollars to support the projects. But it's that mindset. It's my budget, and that's something from big pharma, right? Because we're taught in big pharma to protect your budget, right?
Yeah.
Your budget against other departments and other projects. And I think that's a mindset that perhaps I missed in that situation. And the other is, I'll say conversely, so that's one from a hiring perspective, Matt. The other is you come in as a new executive, CEO, or a department head in a small biotech, and you're assessing the talent, you're assessing the culture, you're assessing the fit and the technical needs of the company. And I was in a position where it was clear to me, and based upon feedback, that we had an individual who was not a cultural fit, right? Was disruptive, was not a team player. And in a small company, when the resource constrained, it creates a lot of stress and on the leadership. And this is a leadership level individual.
Yeah.
And I made the classic mistake of, I can fix the situation. And we made attempts. We even brought in some help, right? We brought in a resource to help remedy the situation, but of course, nothing changed. And my lesson was, when you come into an organization as a leader, you have a short period of time to assess and make definitive decisions. If you don't make the right decisions, the other individuals on the leadership team know you need to make that call, and it can disrupt the overall dynamics of the team. So I think, my advice and my lessons in those situations, it's just as important as the hiring is determining who is a part of the team as the mission evolves, as the needs evolve, both from a company perspective, but I think equally as important from a dynamics perspective.
Successful manufacturing of both AAV and plasmid vectors continues to drive the promise of treating genetic disease. Join us as we discuss how manufacturers can set themselves up for success by optimizing processes, adopting automation, and more. The pod is brought to you in collaboration with Cytiva, a global provider of technologies and services that advance and accelerate the development, manufacture, and delivery of therapeutics. Check out their resources at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. That's CYTIVA.com/emerging biotech. All right, I'm gonna shift gears here. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna shift gears. I'm gonna try to gracefully segue.
Sure.
Here's my attempt at gracefully segueing to propping Life Bio up for the mission at hand financially. My buddy and frequent guest on the show, Alan Shaw, likes to say that investors don't bet on horses; they bet on jockeys. Which I like. I like to borrow that now and then. So we talked about the jockeys. You got a stable of good jockeys. We talked about how you ended up with that stable of good jockeys. Now you've got, we'll shift gears specifically to Life Bio. Now you've got I don't want to say formidable challenge. It's always a formidable challenge to raise enough money to, continue operations and move through the clinic. But perhaps a bigger challenge in this market, as I ascertained from the outset of the conversation. So tell us about that hiring strategy. Give us some thoughts on, what, knowing full well that this was going to be a differentiation challenge in a crowded community of biotechs with their hands out. What was your sort of MO and philosophy going into the fundraising scene?
Yeah, from a strategy and a perspective of preparation. Well, first thing, I'd be remiss. We have an amazing executive team, right? And I was fortunate enough to be able to hire a CFO and join Life Biosciences, and the CFO have tremendous amount of experience both in private and public companies, raising capital both in private and public companies. Tremendous deal experience as well, and brings a discipline and a steadfastness in approach to investing, and has been a real leader for us from a process development standpoint. So much like a marketing plan, there's a lot of work that goes behind what ends up in a final presentation that you're out talking to investors, right? And so we look at it as first understand the market environment in which we get. Who are your competitors? What the value do they bring to the table? What is their positioning? How are they already positioned? What are with investors? So there's sort of that market scan, knowing where you're going to compete, and then it's really looking at and really challenging yourself over the duration of the investment thesis and beyond, or raising capital. What is your plan? You'd be surprised how often folks don't have a plan. Yeah. So we spend an awful amount of time, a large amount of time developing our strategy, aligning on a business plan, right? Aligning on a business plan, knowing that's going to change over time. It's biotech; things change, but developing a plan, and out of that, you begin to develop an investment story, investment thesis. At the end of the day, the question is, why should investors get excited, and why should they invest in you? Mm-hmm. Right? And so it's an mission. It's the management team. What problems do you solve? Where do you bring value? What problems do you solve? What are your capital requirements to get there? What are your achievable milestones for this investment? Right? What am I going to get out of this investment? Yeah. You have the intellectual property, the competitive landscape. So you're a business model there, right? And then I think there's some other. There's all the basics. Everybody's doing that, and then I think one of the things we really do is, and it's a bit scary for a small company, right? We're a handful of people, and we assess the current capital environment and deal price. To do that, you leverage public data. You lean in hard to your banking relationships. They're a tremendous source of ongoing data, right? They have armies of analysts who produce these reports. They can give you. They keep up to date what's going on in mostly public markets, but many have a keen eye on private markets as well, where we are. So that's a tremendous source of data and market intelligence and market trends, what's happening. So you take all this and then you tap in once again to your network, the industry goes through also connected. So once you do that, then you're identifying. We've created a laundry list of investors who either have invested in rounds close to near us, right? We're going to do Series D. They've done VC or beyond or D. We look at, we're trying to exclude those who only do startup, right? Initial seed. We make that list. We try to identify where they have an affinity for, from stage investment, from their categories, where they are in the stage of the fund. Are they at the end of the life of the fund, and they just raised a new fund? Do they lead or do they follow? Right? You're trying to identify all these attributes of the fund because it's overwhelming. Even eliminating a plethora of investors, we have a list today of probably 400 plus investors. That's not target. So we continue to, as we go forward, we'll continue to prioritize, ratchet down, and make our menu, our wish list, and then attack the problem there. So that's on one element, right? How do you, in a world where your most precious thing is your time, how do you best set the stage for success instead of just wasting your resources? And then I think there's the other part of preparation is how do you prepare for delivering the story? And so there's delivering the story, and then there's the inevitable questions that are going to come, the diligence in the meetings. Yeah. And I think I mentioned this previously, and our CFO has been a great driver for this. We have a list of hundreds of questions, potential questions from all aspects of the business, from science to work programs, intellectual property, financing strategy, markets, competitive environment, personnel, history of the company, and on and on and on. And so we keep a running tab from all of our meetings, but also from our experience, knowing where these questions are. We divide and conquer. Yep. And we keep this running tab of questions every time we have a meeting, or periodically we revisit the questions and we update them with most current issues. And that will evolve over time as markets change, as competitors change, as you generate more data. Those questions will just evolve. And so that can help you because you want to spend as much time staying focused on the core message with the investors. And so being able to answer, they ask you, answer, you get back to your message of why they should invest. The less you're prepared, the more you deviate from the question. And then I think that the ultimate culmination is the actual marketing tools, right? The investor deck. And we're spending an inordinate amount of time always refining and building investor deck because it's a 20 to 25 slide max story of you. And this is the first impression. In addition to that, you build one pagers, you build your outreach emails. See, the whole process that's a whole lot of work, right? That's the duck. I mean, a lot of paddling, right? And then when you're in front of a potential investor, you want to do your great.
I got to ask you a question about the database of questions. So you keep this, you keep this list or this database of questions that you've been asked, that you could potentially be asked, multiple source from multiple locations, plus responses, right? Like, and you do this, I'm assuming to avoid, obviously to be prepared, do the responsible thing and be prepared, know yourselves and also avoid surprise. Do you ever get surprised? Even with this level of preparation, are you frequently
we work in a business with tremendously intelligent people.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting, right? We're all, in my experience, I've been doing this a good while, right? In front of investors or business development, right? It's all the same. And it's interesting. Individuals are influenced by their own experiences, their own education, their backgrounds, which
sure.
No two are the same, and everybody has a little bit different experience. And then there are times when a question is really just a challenge and to see how you respond. It may not be even relevant, right? It's a little bit of a test. And frankly, questions do come when you're in a competitive environment where there are others in your same quote unquote space. Those questions will evolve as often there are two or three companies with this in this own therapeutic, same therapeutic category in front of these investors on an ongoing basis, and so questions will evolve over time. So of course we get surprised. Of course, we like to be 99% prepared, but there's always something there.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to be surprised. You can go something to take back.
It's okay. People have to know it's okay to say, "Great, thank you. I don't have that right now. I'm not sure that's, but get back to them." That is, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. Plus, it gives you some additional data to add to your questions at database. Take that back to the office. That's fantastic. And I'm gonna dovetail from there from that unique and perhaps surprise question concept that I just brought up when we start talking about some of the differentiators that life has to create, in this space from an investment standpoint. But before we get to that, the last time you and I spoke, you spoke a little bit. You expressed a conservative appreciation for pragmatic valuations from the investment community. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about your philosophies on the danger of high valuations and how your conservative approach might align with, sort of the Silicon Valley mindset of investors. Yeah,
I mean, it's to me, it's pragmatic, it's practical. Investors, individuals as well, they invest to make money. Right? There has to be an investment thesis that allows them, for the risk they're taking with their capital, to achieve a given value. And I think sometimes companies at the early seed stage or even in Series A, if it's not with, often not with a biotech, that valuation can, the biotech investors, and the valuation can become inflated. And then so when, our business is, and I say this tongue in cheek because it's an amazing business and I love it, but if you want long timelines, high costs, and high risk, it's the perfect investment for it, right?
Yeah.
Perfect investment.
Right.
So in order to mitigate that risk, investors, they have to manage valuation on these investments. Right? If it gets out of control, it puts so much pressure on everything to go perfect for them to make money. In addition to all the other risks that come along with our business, right? So the investment thesis then fails. And so the risk you have is if your valuation escalates beyond the point where the next round of investors can see an upside, right? A reasonable upside if you hit your milestones, along with all the rest of the days with that. It becomes a difficult conversation for people, right? This becomes a difficult point. So it's either it's just not going to be worth your time to do the work, or the company will face a significant downturn, and that's never fun, right? It's happening all the time right now. But if the company is built logically and from the beginning, and the management team, the investors realize that there's much more value to be made in a stepwise approach, it becomes attractive to investors. And we may not like it, but it is the tried and true way, I think, to have a good relationship with both existing investors, is to keep that valuation tempered early, allow the science and the milestones to drive the value.
Yeah, yeah. You joined Life Bio at sort of the, I don't know, I guess it was either early or like early mid kind of economic drop off, like capital markets drop off. Do you see that changing right now? I mean, is the pendulum swinging?
Yeah, so first of all, we were very fortunate. We actually closed our Series C in January of 2022. So we raised over $80 million. And so we were very fortunate as things were falling apart, right?
Yes.
So we feel good, and that we have plenty of capital to operate our business plan. We didn't have to make changes, right? We made the right business decisions, which is a nice. I think many of my colleagues out there, it's nice when your business plan drives the effort instead of the finances, and so we're able to execute on our plan. I will say I was really glad in 2022 and the early stages of 2023 that we were well financed and keep our heads low. I think now, as we start to think about financing, as we move forward, which we may talk about later where we're headed, we're starting to see, I think, a desire among investors to look at really interesting novel biology, novel science, as our business addresses significant unmet needs. We announced some data earlier this year, some non-human primate data, neuropathy model, and on the heels of that, we did have significant outreach from investors who are now interested in this space and wanting to see what's happening, and that's been a good sign. And I think you're starting to see overall some movement in capital markets. There have been some IPOs. You're seeing more big pharma deals occurring, and many have told me that's a good leading indicator as pharma begins to become more active. It kind of opens our market. So I feel like we're still working through the tough days, but I'm starting to see anything of folks looking for new opportunities instead of just preserving capital to support existing investments.
Yeah. So it occurs to me, as I sort of alluded to, that this space in particular, from an investor standpoint, could potentially, I'm not going to make assumptions, but could potentially be somewhat polarizing. Like, there's a whole giant biotech investment community out there that's like, yeah, show us some solid proven data around a modality that we know, and we're going to jump on that, on that train, and attacking an indication that is well defined and that we know, and we're going to jump on that train. And then we have this concept of like, yes, we're going to attack some specific age related indications, but the bigger picture here, the longer term play is, to treat aging as though it's therapeutically manipulative. We can manipulate it therapeutically. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, how do you clarify where the company sits sort of on this anti-aging continuum and differentiate to the right folks who are going to be receptive to that message? Because not everybody, I think you'd agree, not everyone's going to be receptive to that concept.
No, that's a big question. Big question. So
I know,
I'll say clearly,
I'm terrible. I've got a bad habit for these.
Question. I mean that in the right way, because it's such a broad space. I'll say it clearly. We are a biotech company, and we adhere to the principles of biotech. And And we're focused on advancing therapeutic candidates to address significant unmet medical needs for patients with age-related diseases and diseases that have established regulatory pathways. That's our near-term goal. So, period, end of story. We have, if you look under the hood, you'd think we were like any other biotech. We're staffed with individuals, the executive team, and additional members of the team who've been there. We've been at Big Pharma, run programs at Big Pharma. We hold ourselves to that standard scientifically. Okay? Our goal, this is where our goal is to reverse and prevent disease and extend the health span, that is, the healthy lifespan of patients. We think there's a lot to improve there. Today, too many people, their health span is insufficient. Right? They spend the last 10 years of their life in poor health. Our goal is, can we flatten that curve? Can we extend the years of your life that are healthy? And as a byproduct of that, people live longer, probably. It may be a side effect, right, of living healthier. And so that's our goal. We have rejuvenation programs. Yes, they target foundational drivers of aging processes that contribute to the aging of cells and their susceptibility to disease. We believe that we can restore these age-limited cells to a more youthful and resilient state. That's the difference, right? When I was at Merck, we were treating age-related disease, and people with high cholesterol and heart disease, people with hypertension, people with osteoporosis. I think the subtle difference here is that we're targeting biology associated with the aging process. And the goal is not just to treat disease, treat symptomatically, but our goal, we want to, and we would be disappointed if we can't prevent and reverse. And it's really that, can we reverse disease? Can we take someone who has lost visual function and restore some or most of that visual function? That's our goal. That's our goal, by targeting these underlying processes that are involved with this aging process. I mean, there are a host of other things involved in age, right? It's your lifestyle, environmental factors, but we believe science supports, and so far we've been able to demonstrate in non-human primates that we can, in fact, preserve cells. We believe we can rejuvenate injured cells. And we have indications of, in the case of an optic neuropathy model, we believe we demonstrate that we have the potential to restore, in that case, visual function. So I think that's the subtle differences. But look under the hood. If you meet with us, we run this like a biotech. We have decision trees. We make tough no-go decisions. Right? We have detailed preclinical plans. We have regulatory experts who work with big pharma or gene therapy companies. Right? So all that is very, very akin to what you see in the space. I think in the broader L space, I'll call it, we don't really use that term here. There are. It's unfortunate, right, that consumer products and over-the-counter products bring a different perception of this space. Now, ultimately, could our goal? It's with evidence and time. Can we get to a point where we think we can affect aging? We'll see. But we have a lot to prove now, and the first step is to target diseases of aging with our biology to affect change in them. So, long-winded answer to your question.
No,
that's what we're about today, and I've aligned the company's skills to that end.
Yep, not necessarily long-winded answer to, like you said, a big question. I'm curious about sort of, this will give you an opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about the pipeline itself, because I'm curious about the boundaries that a company like Life Biosciences puts on initially, like right off the bat, like looking at where we're going to go around age-related disease. That's obviously up for the definition of age-related disease, or the limits of age-related disease, is definitely up for philosophical and scientific debate. So tell us, I guess what boundaries you start with in terms of the indications that you're going to go after, and how that has informed your pipeline today.
So it starts, is there an unmet medical need? Significant unmet medical need? Because our biology is a promise with our biology. We do proof of concept work, right? So you test the biology, and then is there a clinical development and regulatory pathway? That's That's the limit. And I think where we focus today isn't something where, because our programs are around cellular rejuvenation. Can we target cells and tissues and rejuvenate these cells to a more youthful and resilient state? And that's really the balance, right? It's not limited as right now. It happens to be our lead programs in ophthalmology. We're clearly looking at neurodegeneration. We're clearly going to look at other areas. Could be hearing loss, could be others. Our science will take us there, right? We have a step one in the process is proof of concept with our lead programs. And then where it takes us from there will be an interesting, I think, tangential. So we'll stay within that theme of cellular rejuvenation, but it may take us in many different organs and tissue systems. Right? Our one program, our flagship program, is a partial epigenetic reprogramming platform, which uses 3 transcription factors, which keep it simple as OSK. Given our IP around OSK, we will continue to explore and research different target organs and systems for age-related diseases where you have aging of cells and rejuvenate for the benefit of patients. And that will drive our pipeline. And so our second program is termed chaperone-mediated autophagy, which is in discovery stage. How it relates to age-related disease and age-related function and aging is our body is tremendously efficient, has a tremendously efficient recycling process for misfolded and unwanted proteins at the end of their useful life. Chaperones escort these proteins with a certain motif for cardiac destruction. They escort them to the lysosome, the antitheroid receptor to LAMP2A. Unfortunately, LAMP2A, its expression diminishes as we age. It's been proven in animals and humans. And so the ability of our body to recycle these proteins diminishes, and they end up aggregating, accumulating in the form of oligomers, and they disrupt cellular signaling. And this has a potential impact in a host of disease states, including neurodegenerative, ophthalmology, among others. So it's a tremendous opportunity as well, finding this age-related aging issue and targeting something that is part of the aging process and resetting and restoring that, rejuvenating that process to a much more beautiful state.
Yeah, very good. I know we're running short on time here, Jay, so I'm gonna kind of fast forward a little bit, but I want to stay on this this thread around sort of the perception and appetite in the market for age-related disease therapeutics. What do you see, as I referenced, the investor community? Like, there's going to be folks who are super hot on this, and folks who don't want to touch it, just like any other any other approach, I'm sure. What are you seeing from big pharma? Like, if you look out down the road, and I'm not going to assume what your exit strategy might look like at Life Bio, but let's say if it were, to appeal to big pharma, what do you see happening in terms of their interest?
Here's like I say, Matt, I can't speak specifics, but when I arrived 2 years ago, there was already a lot of interest. I think we're moving from inquisitive to seeking understanding to feeling I need to have an effort. There are several large pharma who have a focus and an effort on aging biology, age-related disease, under these fundamental principles of these processes of aging. So we've had significant interest. I think we're too early right now. It's our desire to continue to build the company, but for sure down the road we see opportunities. I see it as sort of that natural evolution of skepticism to intrigue and interest. And I think it's on us, right? The onus is on us in this industry to develop real science, real evidence in a manner that is akin to how they develop therapeutics. And to me, from my experience in my Merck days and other, that was critical. And that's part of the reason we aligned our organization and set into place processes to develop our therapeutics in that similar vein. But I see continued interest. And I don't think it's going to change. It represents an entirely new space and a new way to approach disease. And whether in our case we have a gene therapy program, which is interesting to a discrete set of companies, and then our small molecule program has a much more a much broader pool of those interested, because neurodegeneration is still an issue and still many, many unsolved problems there, right? As is true as well in ophthalmology.
I want to jump back real quick to a point when I was asking you initially about how the company sort of differentiates itself from some of the noise in this anti-aging market. If I asked you that question more specifically in the context of cell and gene therapy companies that are looking at anti-aging, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had conversations with other CEOs, other companies that are attacking aging from a cell therapy standpoint, that have had varying degrees, I guess, over the years of attaining a level of like respect, understanding, and the appropriate perception of the approach. So if I were to ask you that question again and sort of ask you how Life Bio differentiates itself in the context of just cell therapy companies that are sort of swimming in the same pool, how might you respond?
Yeah, I mean, we don't focus on other companies, but I can tell you what we're doing. And our science is well understood in terms of, we're not gene editing, we're not replacing genes. We're introducing transcription factors, 3 genes that can reset the epigenome. And that is frankly what we're doing. And I think that really separates us from many of the others in the field, and given our intellectual property. And I think that's important to understand.
Yeah.
We're really, truly just we want the body to get back to its productivity and efficiency and resilience as it was in an earlier state of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Good deal. What's next? I was going to ask you, about pivoting. Like, you come in with this approach, and you've got a lot of opportunity to kind of take it wherever you might. And I think you responded to that a little bit. I think you gave us some hints as to like what the pivots might look like, or where the peripheral movement might look like. But in terms of like what's directly in front of you right now to move into clinic and what your next steps might be, what does that look like?
Yeah, for our epigenetic reprogramming platform for multiple optic neuropathy indications, we're charging ahead with our IND enabling program that will occur, and then we'll kick that off later this year. And we expect to complete that hopefully by the end of 24, and file an IND and be in the clinic either end of 24 or sometime in the first half of 2025. So it's exciting. We believe we're the leader in this epigenetic reprogramming space. We believe we were the first with non-human primate data this year, and we believe we're still on pace to be the first in clinic. So that's exciting for that program. Also along the same lines, as I mentioned earlier, we'll continue research and development on novel ways to deliver, because we use AAV2. It may not be that for different organs and tissues, right? So we'll continue to look at other indications there and continue that ongoing work. For our chaperone medial autophagy small molecule program, we have an ongoing drug discovery program, and the goal is identify a candidate to put into a preclinical program as soon as possible. It could be as early as next year or the following. So exciting times ahead. I think we've really established ourselves as a leader in this field, and we'll see. Getting to the clinic would be a big achievement for the company.
For sure. Yeah. And for our listeners' benefit, if you'd hung in with us this long and learned some of the fundamentals of Jerry McLaughlin's approach to building Life Bio, I appreciate you. And I want to let you know that he just reminded me this conversation about epigenetic reprogramming. My colleague Ben Comer recently interviewed Jerry, and there'll be a story coming out this fall in Life Science Leader magazine on the approach that Life Bio is taking. And I know that Ben is pretty excited. He's a bit of a propeller head, Ben. Sorry, Yar. He geeks out on this stuff, and I'm sure that interview was very enlightening for both of you. But keep an eye out for that story. In the meantime, Jerry, I really appreciate the time you spent with us. I know we took you a little bit longer than probably you anticipated, but great stuff. Great insight into the way that you built Life Bio, and I really appreciate you for it.
No, Matt, I appreciate it. It was an honor and a pleasure. You have a great program. As I mentioned to you before, I'm a listener, and so I've always enjoyed it. So it was a great opportunity to join you here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it too, and yeah, keep listening. I appreciate that. So that's Life Biosciences CEO Jerry McLaughlin. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online, part of the Life Science Connect community, sponsored by Cytiva, whose support of new and emerging biopharma companies is on full display at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. If you like listening in on conversations like this one with Jerry, subscribe to the Business of Biotech podcast. Sign up for our newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. Be sure to leave us a review. And as always, thanks for listening.